Welcome on board the Rich Planet Starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall. This week's guest is a stalwart of the truth movement. His research into the London 7/7 bombings is detailed and incisive, and suggests that the official story is nothing more than a pack of lies. He attended the recent 7/7 inquest and joins me today to talk about the new information he has gleaned from the inquest, and also to explain the compelling evidence which shows that 7/7 was a false flag plot orchestrated by authorities, and that the young Muslim men were duped into taking part in a mock terror training exercise and were totally innocent. Welcome, Nick.
It's an honour to be here, Richard.
Good. And we did actually do an interview last year, which unfortunately is sitting on a damaged hard drive, but
I think I've got the story more after the inquest, you see.
Right,
I've got a better focus. The whole story has got a better focus, so
all right.
Perhaps it was well waited till now, Richard.
All right, well, before we go into the story of 7/7, Nick, just a little bit about yourself first, because you did a science degree at Cambridge University, which is no mean feat, and try post-natural science, what's that?
Well, it's a general science degree, maths, physics, chemistry, that sort of stuff.
All right, and then you went on, well, you taught maths.
I majored history, philosophy of science.
Right.
And then I got my Ph.D. UCL in philosophy of science.
University College London. Yeah. And you became a fellow, an honorary postdoctoral fellow at University College London.
For 11 years, yeah.
Right. And you were involved in various research projects to do with astronomy.
Yeah, history of astronomy, right.
All right. And just to mention, you were telling me about your parents, that your mother was also a scientist.
She was a chemist, yeah.
All right. And
yeah,
so very
doctorate.
Sort of hardened, down-to-earth, scientific type person.
Well, she was an agnostic chemist, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what about your father?
He was more sort of mystical, intuitive type. He was brought up by the Theosophists in Australia, and he worked all his life as a psychoanalyst. Mm-hmm. So I had two very different sides to my family, and I felt Dad didn't have a formal education, mm-hmm. and he was a different way of looking at things. Right. And I feel that I've got these two somewhat conflicting sides in my family that I have to try and resolve.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you were very interested in the 9/11 truth movement, but before that, in the 1980s, you were involved in writing various books about, well, what one might call the truth movement, particularly one about entitled "Lead on the Brain."
Yeah, I think there's a sort of bit of a cover-up. Nations' children being brain damaged by lead coming from petrol, and the health authorities weren't properly looking at it all, and how come they were permitting this to happen. And so I researched that whole area in which the government wasn't quite telling the truth to people. And that was a successful campaign. Lead was taken out of petrol. Yeah.
Lead was taken out of petrol, okay. So you feel that campaign that you were involved with basically was a positive outcome?
Totally, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other book that you were involved with, or well, you've written several books, but another book you were involved with was about the sinking of the Belgrano.
Yeah, after the Falklands War, we looked at how the government set up that war so Margaret Thatcher could have the glory of it, and she got re-elected on it. And our Belgrano inquiry looked at how the Belgrano was sunk in order to prevent peace breaking out. We then got the book, The Unnecessary War, published. Right. And that's a very fascinating area. I'm still building up a website on it now.
I've never heard that term before, peace breaking out in order to prevent. People normally say in order to prevent war breaking out. So you use the term where an untruth is used to justify a war.
That is what happened, yeah. I think the British got quite a knack of doing that, of starting wars and getting a moral justification for the war. And I think that is happening now in this age of fabricated fake terror, in which our government is permanently at war. Now, this is what we're looking at here.
And that, as you say, that statement brings us onto the subject of today, which is, 9/11 and 7/7, where an untruth is used to justify a war. And we are going to be talking about your book, Terror on the Tube, which has been out. When did you first publish this, Nick?
Oh, a couple of years back.
A couple of years back,
yeah.
Which is a detailed investigation into the 7/7 London bombings. But you've got a new edition coming out soon, which includes your research
the whole inquest story.
The whole inquest,
yeah.
Right. Now, let's talk about 9/11 for a little bit first before we go into 7/7, because you were involved with a guy called Keith Motherson, who was heavily involved in 9/11 Truth very early on, really. I mean, I didn't get to know about the flaws in the official story of 9/11 until probably 2008. But you were involved.
I think Keith and I were both like founder members of the British 9/11 Truth movement.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it was a very, very exciting time to be in that. It was a very dynamic group. And I think that's really the determining event of the new millennium, this phony, fake, fabricated event of 9/11, and looking at how it was constructed and how a false blame is laid upon the Muslim enemy to justify war. That's a very important, very fascinating subject. And it was through the community of people in the 9/11 Truth movement that I got involved in the 7/7 story and discussing what really happened.
Can you remember how soon after the 9/11 events, when you witnessed it on TV, as everyone did,
Yeah.
did you just believe the official story?
I'm afraid so, yeah.
You did, yeah.
It
I
took
mean,
me quite a while
did,
for it to sink in.
So when, I mean, how long after did you start to question it?
Well, I can remember actually a lady telling me about the hole in the Pentagon, saying it was so small that it couldn't possibly have a Boeing aeroplane go into it.
Right.
I remember being incredulous. That cannot be. And so I think that was the kind of start.
Right.
And I got Nafiz Ahmed's book, actually. That was the first book I read.
Now, the other book that you recommend, which broadly explains the whole hypothesis of false flag terrorism, is a book by Webster Tarpley.
Yeah.
Can you briefly tell us about that, Nick?
Yeah, the synthetic terror, that is a very profound analysis of 9/11 and of the way in which the government sets up these terror events. And he was involved in Italy with what we call the Operation Gladio, which is way back in the 80s, where railway stations were blown up and the commies were blamed. And it was actually the far right, that is elements of NATO, that were blowing up this, causing these explosions throughout Europe. And that's terribly important and terribly relevant to what's happening in Europe now with Madrid and London railway stations being blown up. And his analysis is of what's happening in this new millennium as the government, what is ordinary good folk is unthinkable, that the government fabricates the terror event. And it does so because it's got such an enormous military budget. It needs your fear. It needs the people to live in fear. That's the terrible reality that most people don't quite get. It's very odd, Richard, that in America, a huge truth movement has broken out and has been very, very successful. About half the population of New York believe they've been told the truth about 9/11, and nothing of the kind has happened in this country with 7/7.
Right, and we will come on to that. And I mentioned Keith Motherson, who we will talk about in the next show, because we're going to record 2 shows with this information. A tragic story about Keith, who was, as you say, was one of the first 9/11 truthers in the UK. Okay, now...
Well, nobody helped me more with my book than Keith,
right.
Going over the whole story. And I knew him long before that. We were a group called Institute for Law and Peace, about whole legal arguments about peace activists could use. And Keith was very keen on that. And I knew him in the days with CND and stuff. So him suddenly ending up in a loony bin, that was quite heavy stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's just summarise the events of 7/7. So the official story is that there were 4 alleged bombers. 3 travelled from Leeds on the morning of the 7th of July 2005. 3 of them in a Nissan Micra. They arrived early in the morning at Luton train station car park. Prior to that, the 4th alleged bomber arrived from Aylesbury in a Fiat Brava. They congregated in the car park at Luton train station. The official story says that the 4 of them then caught the train to King's Cross. 3 of them split off onto 3 different tube lines and detonated bombs. The 4th one, about an hour later, he hung around King's Cross for a while, and then he allegedly got on a bus and set his bomb off. That's the official line. And we're going to go through various pieces of evidence today to try and get to the truth of what really did happen. Now, after 7/7, approximately 2 weeks, there was the shooting of Charles de Menezes, is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah.
Now he was gunned in the head 7 times. People thought he was a terrorist. It turned out he wasn't a terrorist. People said he looked like he had a backpack on him. Turned out he didn't have a backpack on him. So you went to an event at a tube station which was in commemoration of de Menezes.
Yeah,
and you met various
shrine.
7/7 people there.
Yeah,
Tell
I
us about
gathered
this, Nick.
there was a little group focusing on the July the 7th issue, and they call themselves 7/7 Truth Campaign, and I became part of that group. Keith and I both became part of it for about a year, and I did a couple of pages of their website, and so being part of that and also part of the London 9/11 group, I think that was the context within which I gradually got pulled into the story, fascinated by the story, pulled into it, and then the decisive thing was a month or 2 later when I went up to Luton and we checked out the train times, and I somehow got pulled into history by that event.
Well, we'll come on to that, but just staying on de Menezes first, I've heard it suggested that he was an electrician and possibly involved in preparing the authority-planted bombs.
Well, that's a conjecture. Nobody knows, basically. Nobody knows what the link is. But he categorically was not involved in any terror plots. Certainly not, no.
Even the authorities admit it was an accident to kill him.
Yeah. It appears that way.
Yeah.
But it looks as if it wasn't the police who gunned him down. It was some special
unit which you've identified.
Various newspapers said that the Force Reconnaissance Regiment, that's a very new counter-terror unit, FRR, Force Reconnaissance Regiment, set up from, it's an Irish team. They've been doing sort of dirty operations in Ireland, had skills in bomb making, alleged counter-terror type unit, and people saw people around with very special fancy guns when de Menezes being
so what this
shot.
is? So the evidence.
And it looks as if it was the FRR that probably did it. Yeah.
So what is the evidence that the FRR killed de Menezes?
Well, basically, the British police are not into gunning someone down with 7 bullets in the head with special dum-dum bullets that explode on impact, and with 7 bullets shot slowly. That isn't the way the British police do things. But they haven't been allowed to deny it. It's very much as if the British police wish they could be allowed to deny, say that really wasn't us, but they're not allowed to. These people, as it were, have cover.
So the FRR, would they just be above the British law then?
I think so, yeah.
Sanctioned by, what, MI5 or something? Or
well, something like that. It's an army, special army unit that when it operated in Basra, it was found to be totally immune from any prosecution whatsoever, and it's also suspected of shooting down the lads at Canary Wharf on
which we will come on to.
Yeah.
Because this is the, what Muad'Dib, who made the film 7/7 Ripple Effect, I think he was possibly one of the first to suggest that it was really Canary Wharf where the alleged bombers were actually killed. Or some of them. So where does this information come from? Who first said that the FRR was possibly involved in the killing of de Menezes?
Well, I think it was the Scotsman obviously got an informed source talking to them, and so the surveillance was done by the FRR. That is even in going to Wikipedia on de Menezes, it talks about the FRR as being involved in surveillance, but I think it may be more than that they actually shot him. It was some sort of killers who were totally immune from being prosecuted or from any inquiry, and then when they turn up in Basra, and it turns out they've got bomb-making equipment, they're planning to blow something up disguised as Arabs, and they have to be rescued. They're put in jail. They have to be rescued as if they know something, and the British government could not risk these people being interrogated. They have bomb-making skills from Northern Ireland. I think that they are quite a good candidate for whoever planted bombs on the morning in the context of the July 7th event.
Now, you attended the inquest, which finished in March. Just tell us how long the inquest went on for, Nick.
It was a massive 5-month event, and it was hearing evidence. It was kind of like a development of the Greater London Council inquiry into 7/7, which happened in 2006, whole lot of people give evidence, and there's no evaluation of the evidence. There's no weighing of the scales of justice. We're told right at the start who did it, and you just got a smarmy lawyer introducing all sorts of witnesses, and Lady Justice had it, giving a certain decorum and dignity to the event, making sure everyone feels okay, nobody's insulted, everyone's treated right, and nobody is there to evaluate what is said.
All right.
There's no conclusion at the end of it.
So the purpose of the inquest was to try and determine if the intelligence agencies could have protected the public better. So there was no actual
that might have been one of the purposes.
That it was inference of whether there was guilt or not on the part of the alleged bombers. That's
certainly not. No.
Right.
Okay. Well, hard to say what the purpose what was of the inquest. Maybe answering the perpetual despairing public inquiry clamour, can we not have an independent inquiry about 7/7? The biggest attack on London since the Blitz. Why can we not have an inquiry? And perhaps this is the government's answer. Oh, the nearest we can do is have this big 5-month thing at the Royal Court of Justice, which is the very symbol of British justice, and we're supposed to be satisfied that now this has happened. Certainly has been very, very thorough, enormous amount of people given testimony.
But not asking the right questions.
Well, not really. Carefully avoiding
the right questions.
any crucial questions that might disturb anything. The official line is totally laid down, and there's no doubt about the official line. Nobody can doubt or query the official line, and everyone's supposed to be happy now that it's over.
Okay. All right then, Nick. Well, we're going to go for a short break, and after the break, we will be doubting the official line. Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Nick Kollerstrom, author of Terror on the Tube, an investigation into the 7/7 London bombings. Now then, Nick, let's just go through the timeline, as we call it, of the morning of 7/7. We've got, because the official story, the government, they actually wrote a document, although it seemed to be authorless, I believe, where they claim that the alleged bombers got the 7:40 train. So just tell us about that.
Yeah, for a whole year that was the story. All government and Metropolitan Police sources were saying that they got the 7:40, even though I and a colleague, we went up in August 2005 to Luton, and we interviewed commuters, and we got the official timetable from Luton and from King's Cross, and we showed there had not been any 7:40. So this was what Muadzib in his ripple effect calls the hand of God. See, it was the perfect crime had been devised, and this was the flaw in the crime that had been devised. There was some overhead power cables in the Mill Hill area, and all trains were really slow that morning. They were delayed about 25 minutes, and the 7:40 itself was cancelled. That was the train they had agreed that they were supposed to travel on, and it took the authorities a whole year before they finally came around to admit that.
So you contacted the train company, and you found out not only the ones that had been cancelled, but you found the actual times of the trains which did run.
Yeah.
Now, so there's one scheduled at 7:40 which was cancelled. The official line was that that's the train that they got. So that was the official, even though it was publicly known that that train had been cancelled, it was the official line for a whole year.
Yeah.
Now the government, or I remember John Reid announcing in Parliament that there'd been a change in the official stance.
Yeah.
Which was what?
Well, they surmised possibly they could have got a train that left at 7:25 that morning.
So there was
that makes it, though, a terrific rush.
Right. So the actual departure, the train that they're talking about was due to leave at 7:24, left at 7:25, and the actual arrival at King's Cross was at 8:23.
Yeah.
Now, the first alleged suicide bomber, let me just see, 8:35, the eastbound Circle Line, train number 204.
That's when he would have to have left King's Cross. Yeah.
So he would have to have left King's Cross at 8:35, and the official story says he got there at 8:23.
Yeah. Don't forget, it's about 10 minutes to go from the King's Cross Thameslink line to the Underground.
Right.
It's quite a walk, especially with a heavy rucksack.
Right.
And a lot of debate about what train they could have caught, but there's enough time there, but there isn't really enough time for them coming in to Luton. Remember, the famous picture has them coming into Luton, Luton main station at 7:22.
Right, so let's just discuss that picture. Shortly after the bombings had occurred, there was a single frame of CCTV footage put out at Luton Station of the 4 alleged bombers coming in, and it's time-stamped at 7:22.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there's no way they could have caught the train at 7:25 from Luton if they went in at 7:22?
Well, it would have been a terrific rush.
So have you actually walked at Luton, bought a ticket and then gone onto the platform to
We
see
did
how long?
try doing all that.
So how long would it take if you were walking in at 7:22?
Well, a bit longer. It's hard to say, but it's like 5 minutes.
Now that photograph itself at 7:22 Luton Station, just tell us about that, Nick, because this, for a while, this was the only piece of CCTV that had been put out, and it was a single frame.
It's quite a mystery, because it's not just photoshopped and fiddled with, but it's so badly photoshopped and fiddled with, as if everything that could have been done wrong with it has been done wrong. For example, there's one bit of pavement which is totally wet with rain, there's a boundary, and then it's dry. And there's nothing overhead to make that boundary. It had been raining a bit, but you couldn't possibly have that sharp boundary. That's an example. And then all the different characters are something wrong with the way the head is done, or the leg, or there's a cut in where two things are photoshopped together. And most famously, Khan has a whole bar going in front of him that should be behind him, and his head, he's got a bar going in front that should be behind. And this isn't just interference effects. I mean, I've quoted in my book experts on photoshopping, on the photo, on the.
One of the alleged bombers, his face has obviously been blurred.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a one where the guy's legs, they look like they've been pasted in because they're not right for his body. So all photographic experts agree, or Photoshop experts, that photograph is a fake, it's a forgery. And for a while it was the only piece of evidence showing the 4 of them at Luton.
Yeah. So it's still a mystery why, if they wanted to put out a picture, that they put such a bad one like that. And also it's a mystery that none of the press ever said there was anything funny or wrong with that picture. It's one of the mysteries of this whole story, that the press appear totally docile and amnesiac, and they will just print whatever they're told, and they don't appear capable of doubting any aspect of this story.
Now, in 2008, there was another, sorry, not another trial, but there was a trial.
Yeah, the so-called July the 7th trial.
Which is the Kingston trial.
Yeah.
Now, that was 3 friends or
3 friends who knew the 4 well. Yeah.
Who knew the 4. They were trying to do them for assisting.
Yeah.
And they brought out CCTV evidence which hadn't been shown yet.
They did, yeah.
Which showed them at King's Cross, allegedly.
A very blurred, dark picture.
I've covered this on my show.
With the timestamp obviously added in later.
Right. You can't make out the faces on them.
No.
It's highly dubious, especially if you compare it to the images that they've put out of them on the dummy run, which are all completely clear.
Completely clear,
right.
Yeah.
So you were telling me earlier that these new images that were brought out at the Kingston trial, let's assume that they are correct. Okay. What were the timestamps on them at the Kingston trial?
Well, they did show a sequence of the 4 going into Luton Station and going through the ticket barrier and going onto the platform in time to catch the 7:25. Okay.
Right.
Now,
which lines up with their second corrected story.
Yeah, exactly. So this is
originally they said they got the 7:40, but it had been cancelled. So so a year gone by, they're now saying it's 7:25.
Yeah. So then 3 years later, they come out with this sequence of CCTV, and that prompts the obvious question: if they've got all this CCTV clearly showing them going down to the platform at 7:22, 7:24 at Luton, then how could anybody possibly say for one moment that they caught the 7:24? You just couldn't. If that
you mean the 7:40?
7:40, yeah.
Yeah. So
you couldn't possibly think that they had caught the 7:40 if you had all that
CCTV evidence.
Yeah.
So in other words, after they've changed their story to 7:24:25, they've then brought out CCTV evidence to try and back that up, which doesn't really show their faces.
No, it doesn't really show faces.
Right.
No.
They've brought that out, but if they had that in the first place, how come they've got it wrong that they were on the 7:40?
Exactly.
So
they could never have thought that in the first place.
Yeah. So they've kind of shot themselves in the foot.
They have, really. Yeah. If there were any such thing as critical journalism in this country, it would point that out.
Right. All right. Now, just so as I say, I pointed out the CCTV evidence which the BBC have showed over and over again of the alleged bombers at King's Cross, where there's a sequence of the four of them going through. And again, you can't see their faces at all.
Now, I might point out that what the BBC showed on the anniversary of 7/7 for King's Cross was actually the June the 28th dummy run, which, as you point out, is totally clear pictures. There's actually 3, not 4, and without the timestamp. They took off the time and date, and they showed that. They kept showing that on the anniversary of 7/7. This is the BBC deliberately deceiving the public by showing the June the 28th images as if they were the 4 coming on July the 7th.
Just to explain that, Nick, for any audience members not following, the alleged bombers, some of them went to London on the 28th, 9 days earlier, and they did what is alleged to be a dummy run. Now, you believe that they were possibly involved in a mock terrorist training exercise on the day of 7/7, and this was possibly a mock dummy run so that they knew where to go and which tubes to get on the 28th, and they were filmed at that time. And the BBC was showing that rather than any actual footage of the bombers, alleged bombers, sorry, on the day, because the train was cancelled. So if we just now postulate as to what we think really happened instead of nitpicking with the official story, they've missed the 7:40.
Missed the 7:40,
Okay, so they've not got on the 7:25 as the official story says. They've probably got on an actual later train. Now there's one here at 7:48. Which gets in at 8:42. And if they got in King's Cross at 8:42, it would be totally impossible for them to have got on the tubes for them to detonate their alleged bombs.
So, and I don't know if you'd like me to mention now, at the inquest, this is a big experience for me, a massive amount of totally genuine CCTV, Hasib was saying, starts at 6 minutes to 9. And it runs on until 22 minutes past 9. And it's him wandering around King's Cross Station, outside and inside, going into Smith's, rummaging in his rucksack, crossing over the road to McDonald's. And it's clearly genuine CCTV. And for me, that was a powerful experience. And it showed not only that he really was there, but they had no CCTV at all of him before 6 minutes to 9.
6 minutes to 9. This is Hasib Hussain, the tall one, the young
giant,
guy.
gentle giant.
So what about the other alleged 3?
Well, can I tell you the glimpse of Jermaine Lindsay that we get at King's Cross? It's a lovely picture. First of all, he's the first to turn up at Luton, right? He turns up before 6 o'clock with his van, and he then, what does he do? He's an hour earlier before all the others turn up. He nods off, he goes to sleep. And a lady, the parking lady, comes around and slaps a ticket on his van and sees him asleep in the van, okay? So that's quite a relaxed suicide bomber, okay? And
shouldn't laugh, really. It's not, this guy's lost his life.
Okay, then they turn up at King's Cross, and a guard, just by the ticket barrier at King's Cross, sees someone who he remembers clearly was Jermaine Lindsay. This is a time around about maybe 8:45-ish, before the bombs had gone off, and he says, look, I've got something very urgent. Can I see the station manager or the deputy manager, please? And the guard says, well, can't you just tell it to me? He says, no, I've got to tell it to the deputy manager. This is quite urgent, please. And the guard replies, oh, well, we've got a controls operating, security controls operating in the station now, so it's very difficult for me to disturb him. And you must say, well, what's that? They could see, and this came out at the inquest, a whole lot of police were arriving at King's Cross, and people were being controlled. This is before the bombs went off. Now, this looks very much like Peter Power's terror drill of some kind happening, and the guard was alluding to it in this conversation with Jermaine Lindsay. I can't easily go to get the senior officer because of this terror drill, because of this security control, and I think Jermaine Lindsay saw that going on. He realised something funny was going on, and it began to dawn on him, what is this terror drill he's been asked to participate in? And he decides he wants to talk to the top officer about this. Okay, finally the guard goes off and gets this fellow, comes back, and Jermaine Lindsay has gone. So that's all they ever see of him. As if they decide, look, we better get going now. So sometime, even possibly just before the bombs went off, they saw these crowds milling around, and they realised something bad had happened. So that is a glimpse we get of Jermaine Lindsay. We don't get any other accounts of the other two, and I believe Khan wasn't there at all that morning.
Right. You said that you don't think Khan, who was the alleged ringleader, was actually there.
Yeah. Let me say that the footage I saw of Hasib Hussain totally validates the story of the ripple effect. I think the ripple effect is fundamentally a genuine story, and partly that showing that Hasib Hussain is really there, and partly there's a whole load of evidence coming confirming the Canary Wharf story, which I've got on my website.
Just to interrupt you there, Nick, when I spoke to you last summer, we were discussing 7/7 Ripple Effect, which is the story made by Muad'Dib, and please go and watch 7/7 Ripple Effect. It's a fantastic film which gives Anthony John Hill's account of what he thinks actually happened on 7/7. And you at that last summer, you said to me, Richard, I don't think any of the bombers actually even made it to King's Cross Station.
Yeah.
You then sat through a lot of the inquest, and after you'd sat through the inquest, you then said, no, I think they were there, and I think Muad'Dib's 7/7 Ripple Effect is the most likely scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
However, with one distinct difference, and that is that you don't think Khan was there at all.
Right,
you think there was only three.
Right, yeah.
So tell us why that is.
Yeah. Okay, by the way, just say, on the BBC Conspiracy File programme, they featured me, and I was scoffed at for doubting that they were in London, and I think perhaps that was a mistake.
Right.
And I was sceptical just because there's virtually no genuine CCTV. Or even witnesses.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's come on to Khan. This is quite a poignant story of his wife, his beautiful young wife, expecting a second child, right? And she goes into labour pains on the 5th. Now, Tanweer has hired this car, this Nissan Micra, and him and Khan are driving around in this hired car, and they drive his wife, Hasina Patel, to the hospital. She's in acute agony, labour pains, and he then realises that he has to call off this agreement to participate in a terror drill, and he tells.
So was this on the evening before?
No, it's before that. It's the 5th.
Right.
He takes him to the hospital, and so I think early in the morning, the 6th, he notifies people, or maybe at the evening of the 5th, that he can't actually make it. Now that seals his death warrant. He can't pull out of this this mock terror event. And also it means the authorities, the people handling these people up in Leeds, have to make Hasib Hussain and Tanweer drive down south, just the two of them. They have to do it without Khan. That must have been very tricky, because Khan was normally the boss and the organiser, the ringleader. Right. And they then go and meet Lindsay. And let me point out that one bit of really genuine CCTV we see on this whole day is at the filling station on the M1, just outside Leeds at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's totally natural, genuine CCTV. You see Tanweer looking quite bright and cheerful, and he goes and buys some petrol and crisps and sweets and stuff in the shop. And the station forecourt manager testifies at the inquest on oath. He says there were two people in that car. Two.
I see.
Okay.
Right, okay.
So
this is at the inquest. At
the inquest, yeah. He sees Hasib Hussain's in the front seat. He doesn't get out. Tanweer does get out. So I think his testimony. Some people tried to argue, oh, Khan was in the back seat. I think that testimony is more valuable.
Right.
You know.
So you think that? So that's an eyewitness account backing up what you're saying, that there was only two of them that travelled from Leeds.
Yeah, right.
And the reason why he didn't is because there was problems with his pregnant wife.
Now, the day after, on the 6th, she is frantically trying to contact her husband all through the 6th on her mobile phone, wondering what's happening to her. That's what comes out in that interview.
Right. So he disappears a whole day beforehand.
Yeah. How come she's about to have his child, she might be in labour pains, and he's gone.
Right.
She is desperate.
Right.
And this comes across in an interview, and then there's a very poignant thing that a stillborn child, on the morning of July the 7th. And I think that's just amazing. That, as I see it, is an expression of despair at her husband just apparently abandoning her, and she never sees him again.
Just to stay on Khan for a second, he's probably been painted in the mainstream media as some evil person.
Totally,
but the guy he was a primary school teaching assistant,
Yeah.
and he used to walk young children to school
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
You know, he was a bit of a pillar of the Muslim community,
Totally,
am I
totally,
right?
yeah, totally, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, I don't think there's
And
any...
he was skilled in getting kids off drugs. That was one thing his group used to do. Take them outdoor things, canoeing, going up mountains to get them off drugs.
Some of that's in your book as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's proud of his skill in conflict resolution, in diffusing row between gangs.
And one of these activities, I think there's a photograph in your book where it goes whitewater rafting.
Yeah.
And the mainstream media try to make that out to be the alleged bombers bonding on this whitewater rafting.
You've got to laugh, haven't you?
Yeah.
He gets taken up to the House of Commons. The son of Tony Benn comes down to Beeston to the Hamara Healthy Living Centre for its opening, and you know he's part of all this. He's obviously an up-and-coming star. He's looked up to by everybody in the community, and his stepmother is invited the Queen at Buckingham Palace. It's quite a distinguished family, and it's not religious. He's not religious. None of his friends remember him talking about religion, or particularly wanting to go to mosques or anything.
All right then, Nick. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, and more on 7/7 after that. Why not join me, Richard D. Hall, live for an evening on board the Starship at the Oaken Gates Theatre in Telford, 11th of May 2011. Or on the 23rd of June at Weston-super-Mare's Grand Atlantic Hotel, and on the 29th of September at the Academy Theatre, Barnsley. In the show, I'll be addressing many of the areas I've covered over the past year, including false flag terrorism, UFOs, animal mutilation, the financial crisis, and more. Learn what your government isn't telling you, and what your media isn't allowed to tell you. Find venue and ticket details on the richplanet.net website. Further future venues to be arranged. Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Nick Kollerstrom, who is the author of Terror on the Tube, an investigation into the 7/7 London bombings. Now, we were talking about Khan, who was the alleged lead bomber, and you contend that he wasn't even part of the team on the day of the bombings.
There's no trace of any evidence of anyone seeing him in London or any remotely credible CCTV, except for one witness, obviously false memory syndrome, Danny Biddle on the train. Perhaps we'll come to him. Obviously a sort of fabricated memory that had been given. There's nothing, he's just not there.
Now, his wife claims that he went missing on July the 6th, the day before.
Well, she never saw him after he took her to hospital, basically.
Right.
That was last. I think the whole of the 6th he was missing. I know the inquest tried to make out the two of them went to some store buying stuff, but I would rather go by her interview, why she described it.
Now, she would be a good person to interview now to get her.
Oh God, that would be amazing. It'd be awesome if you could get her. You know.
Right. You don't think that would be easy, though, Nick? Or?
Well, I think there are a whole lot of key figures. If you could interview, you could get the truth, or quite a lot of it to come out.
We started making a list of them. I had it somewhere.
She is very much. She asked if she could give evidence at the inquest through her lawyer Imran Khan, and she was refused. They made cast aspersions on her at the inquest, make statements about the death of her husband, but they won't allow her to be present, and they refused to include the deaths of the 4 young Muslims in the inquest. They totally dodge out of any mention of the cause of death of the 4 bombers.
Well, we'll come on to that. Now, so let's just speculate then and consider what may have happened to him. If he's part of this, if it was false flag, which we believe it was, this thing's probably been planned for a while. George Bush was in the country. There was Israeli officials in the country. Yeah. It was obviously timed to happen at this politically.
It had to happen then.
It had to happen then
because of the Glen Eagles.
So little fly in the ointment. This guy's wife's got problems because of the child, so he pulls out. So what's there? So
this has the terrific repercussion that 2 major things have now gone wrong with the perfect crime. Right. First of all, the train wasn't running. Secondly, the key man has pulled out. And that is enough to explain why they cannot release the CCTV, right? All the CCTV they have in London are of 3, not 4, and they're too late. They arrive too late at King's Cross. And so the
That
police
explains the complete lack of CCTV evidence.
Yeah, except just for Hussein by himself, because they've got a story about why he's by himself.
Yeah.
That's the only
So
stuff
suddenly, at 6 minutes to 9, there's tons and tons of footage of Hasib Hussein, because he was genuinely there, waiting for his alleged bus plot, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
All right.
But I mean, it's only conjecture what happened to Khan. The really important question would be, if there were to be an inquest into these four, were the bodies intact, and what were the families given back by way of remains? I mean, there are stories, quite reliable sources, saying that, for example, Tanweer, the Tanweer family received his body back intact, and it is buried in Paris, Pakistan, intact.
Right.
That is something we'd like to hear more detail about.
Right. Okay. Now, let's just talk about terror drills, because this is something in common with 9/11. On the day of 9/11, there was a admitted to terror drill taking place where they were simulating flying planes into towers.
Yeah, loads of war games and terror drills going on, and practically more than any other day, around 11th and 10th of September.
Now, tell us about the terror drill that was taking place on the day of 7/7.
Well, there's a whole lot of preparation drills and programs leading up to it. Then on the day, Peter Power says, in the afternoon, well, gosh, fancy that. We were doing a terror drill for the very same 3 stations, and it was just the same time, around about 9 o'clock in the morning. And
I'll just interrupt you there, Nick. Did he see? I covered this on my show where Peter Power says it was precisely the same scenario.
Precisely the same, and he said it was the same 3 stations.
Did he say the same 3 stations?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, clearly. And he also said,
when did he say that?
Well, there were 3 interviews on the day. Then there was one more he gave. He went over to Canada for some anti-terror drill on the Saturday, and he then gave another interview. So there's altogether 4 interviews.
There's a page on Peter Power's interviews, isn't there, in your book?
Yeah.
A lot of his statements are in here. All right. So the same 3 stations at the same time.
And also, so he said we had to make the decision to go over from into real time, from practice into real time, make that transition, and we were able to be some help. There are clear implications that something outdoors was happening, and there was a reference to broadcasting stuff on microphones, that the crowds would understand what had happened. And later on, he tried to make out that it was just a desktop exercise, and I guess we'll never quite know the truth. But it's as if something quite major, by way of a terror drill, was going on that morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in 7/7 Ripple Effect and yourself as well, we've tried to calculate the odds against a terrorist drill occurring at the same time by chance that an actual real bomb plot would take place. Now, every calculation I've seen on this, people start nitpicking with it. They say things like, well, certain stations would be more likely than other stations. For example, central London would be more of a target. Well, therefore, you're not calculating the odds correctly.
I think this calculation is important, and it does matter, and it's something around about 1 in a billion. For example, you could say it wouldn't happen at weekends, so it's not all the days in the year. And by chance, there'd be, maybe 2 terror drills a year or 1 terror drill. You can disagree slightly, but for example, they picked 2 stations, Edgware Road and Aldgate, with very high Muslim populations. Now, what is the chance that a Muslim would deliberately target those very high Muslim population? That's extreme odds against. So you can add it. You could factor in further factors like that as against what you just mentioned of having only inner London stations.
What you find if you go on...
I think the simple version of taking all tube stations is as good as we can get for that calculation.
Right.
Yeah.
What you find on internet forums with people who cling to the official story is that they try and shorten the odds of that calculation. They say
they
things...
can't. It doesn't work. Because
yeah, I would agree with you.
You've got basically 4 different factors. You've got 3 stations all the same, and then you've got the same day,
same time,
and you've got the same time. And you can actually go a lot further, because the Panorama programme in May 2004, that was a total... that was the first imagination of the whole event, because you had 3 bombs going off in the London Underground in the morning, and then you had a 4th going off on the road a bit later on. It was a total imagination to prepare the public for the event, and it said this is set in the future, but only just. So this is what you call it, a docudrama, and you had Peter Power as Britain's main terror expert giving the dialogue.
All right.
And in that programme, the public were told who the enemy was. So you're given a preparatory drill, who to hate and fear, that it's Al-Qaeda, and the fact that Peter Power is in that, I think further increases the improbability of, this is how the event is imagined. It was not imagined in the mind of any Muslim. It's not a Muslim crime. It's first imagined on the Panorama programme, then, April of that year, there's the Operation Atlantic Blue. That's a huge operation. All echelons of government are involved. And it goes on in America as well, as simulating bombs put on the London Undergrounds, synchronising with a major international summit, okay? Which again is what actually happened. So this is imagining the event, and I tried to interview a lady who had written the script for this process, and it was too similar to what actually happened, so there was a total security lockdown on it. No British newspapers allowed to discuss the event, okay? Then there's another event called Operation Hanover, again, which the police are rather coy about mentioning, on the 1st and 2nd of July. That's the week before, right? And they dry run a simulation of 3 bombs going off on the London Underground. So at the inquest, they're all smugly saying, oh, well, of course, we could operate very efficiently when this happened on July the 7th because we'd done this practice. So they try to make out that the terror drills they've been doing help to prepare them for when it actually happens. When it's a lot more than that, actually, because the improbability of it happening by chance is just impossible, and we have to conclude it is these are actually imagining and getting ready for the event.
So you think, for example, the Panorama programme is almost pre-programming people to accept it when it happens?
Absolutely, yeah. And there was something a bit similar for 9/11. In the same
I
year,
saw that. Yeah,
of planes being thrown into the towers.
I forget the name of that.
Yeah, it's to prepare the public for the event.
Yeah.
And who is the enemy you've got to hate and fear. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's come on to this CCTV evidence at Luton car park, Luton train station car park.
Oh yeah.
So the alleged bomber from Aylesbury turns up an hour before the others. He parks his car. He then reparks his car. And then a black Jaguar car appears.
Now, let's make clear, this isn't from the inquest. This is a brilliant bit of research from the July 7th Truth Campaign. They're just mulling over the pictures released, and they see this Jaguar, a really smart Jaguar. It drives in just before the cars arrive, and then...
it drives in after the first car has arrived, the first alleged bomber's car arrives.
Lindsay from Aylesbury,
And then the one from Leeds arrives, and it seems to, in response, turn its lights on and turn around.
There's an amazing sequence of just a few seconds that the Nissan Micra comes in the back of the car park, and the lights of the Jag go on a few seconds later, and he's not seeing it out of his back window. It's still dark. It's dark, and this is clearly a telephone conversation. Hi, here we are. And the Jag then drives round, and the two come to park together. So you've got 3 cars next to each other.
But we don't know that for sure, Nick, because they've cut crucial parts out which haven't been released of the Jaguar arriving.
Just as it parks, but just as the Jaguar goes into park with the Nissan Micra coming park, then the CCTV cuts out. That's the important thing. That we've got a story where the CCTV cuts out whenever something crucial is going to happen.
Yes.
Something they don't want the public to see, and the British public are not going to believe that Al-Qaeda is driving a Jaguar, okay? This is a story that won't wash.
Now, just also to stress, Nick, this Jaguar was seen parked in exactly the same place on the 9 days earlier on the dummy run.
That's a very
when we know the same guys came to the car park.
So this is the minder. This is somebody who is a minder for these kids. That's a very important concept with false flag terror. You get the patsies who are set up and they don't know what they're being set up for, and they have a minder, and the minder, the Jaguar, President Jaguar would have really impressed these young lads as a symbol of the British establishment, and they would think we're really helping. Gosh, you know, they're going to help us. And it's a sort of quite likely conjecture that when the CCTV cut out, the three parked together, the Jag guy got out, talked to them and gave them their rucksacks, those big rucksacks. It's unlikely they would have carried them down from Leeds. But, they would probably be given
probably
them
not with bombs in them, but with dummy bombs in them.
With dummy bombs in them, yeah.
So, and now there's speculation as to the fact that whether the driver was Peter Power.
Yeah.
Because I think for all, though, you go on Visor Consultants' website, it sounds like a sort of big organisation, but I don't think it is it? I don't think it's a...
No, it's just him.
It's basically just him.
Yeah.
Right,
I went to visit his office in Piccadilly, trying to get an interview,
Right.
And
I asked him for an interview as well a while back, and he said no. So, okay, so it's quite, well, it's a possibility that this Jaguar was him. Now, we have been trying to find out if Peter Power drove a dark-coloured Jaguar at that time.
Yeah.
And I did appeal for viewers who know him or know what kind of car he drives, and we're still trying to find that out.
Well, let's say how incredible it is that the police have not lifted a finger to find out who is owning this Jaguar when it turns up on the two crucial days.
Yeah.
And obviously it parks right next to the two cars at Luton just before they get out to go to the train. I mean, what more could you want? Why are the police silent about this?
They would surely have to find out who is in that Jaguar. This has got to be a key part of the operation.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah.
So the inquest didn't ask that question.
Totally not. No.
Right.
The timing of the various photographs released at Luton is very garbled, and they got their whole story twisted up with an impossible sequence of, for example, they got one lad coming out of Luton Station at 15 minutes past 7, which is the time when originally, the very first one they released of Hassie Hussain was supposed to be going up the stairs at 15 minutes past 7. So
is that the one where they've cut off the entire rest of the picture and just got him in a...
So the various photographs and sequences they've released will never add up together. Something's been fiddled.
The other thing that annoys me is that every CCTV photograph you see, every member of the public, their faces are all blurred out. Every single one of them.
Well, hang on. That is the police practice.
But why? Why? In my opinion, the reason is it's so that you can't identify that person and then go and ask them, when was this taken? When were you?
That's
because
it's
a way of verifying the timestamp, isn't it? So they cut that out.
You
can't identify anyone.
Yeah, that's what struck me when I saw all these amazing pictures of Hassie Hussain, totally genuine, with the rush hour crowds milling around him. I was told they can't ever release that. All the other people will be blurred out if they do release it. It'll just be him. They would say members of the public might be upset, but I don't think they would. Why should they be upset?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And the same goes for families of the families of the victims being upset at people claiming that the government were involved. Well, no one's contacted me saying that they are upset at theories that I have put out that the government was involved, because there's no doubt that, well, we say government, authorities, certainly not Islamic terrorists.
Well, could we perhaps put an appeal out on this programme?
Absolutely.
I mean, for 9/11, there's no more powerful driving force in the truth movement than the families of the bereaved 9/11, people who died. They're demanding the truth. They're not happy with the government story. They demand the truth. And they are people who have to be taken seriously. And can we not have some families? I mean, for God's sake, we've had a 5-month inquest without any post-mortems. Finally, they let the cat out of the bag. That, oh no, they hadn't done a single post-mortem on any one of the dead. Oh, fancy that. Why not? Well, what the hell did they put on the death certificate? Can we have a bit of indignation from the families that something is amiss now? And if they could help us a bit.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to speak to families of the victims or even survivors, because your stories are of crucial importance. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, contact me at richplanet.net via the website. This new CCTV analysis by the J7 group is casting even more doubt on the official story. We've got several pieces of evidence already that cast massive doubt on the official story. If there are people who know about or who were linked to this plot, I'd like to hear from you, because at some point in time, the truth will come out and those who were involved will be brought to justice. So you have been warned if you were involved in the plot, and it is better for you to come out now and speak to Nick and speak to myself, because this justice has to be served on the evil people who carried out this plot.